Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, the 2021 Buyer Experience, Nailing Personalization to Convert More Leads. Today, we're joined by Guy Yalif, CEO of Intellimize, and Francis Brero, co-founder and CRO of MadKudu. During the webinar, please submit your questions using the Q&A module at the bottom of the screen. We'll record the webinar and send it out to you afterwards. Now for today's agenda. First, the 3 approaches to website personalization. Next, the personalization mix. What is possible? And last, real-life examples. Francis, I turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Sesame, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Please do feel free to send questions in the chat. I mean, the goal of this is not for us to just blabber on about personalization, even though we could for hours and hours, and we already have in the past. So please submit any questions. We're very passionate about the topic. So happy to answer any kind of burning questions you might have. I'm super excited to be here. And I think, Guy, I'll let you kind of get us started. But just like excited to share a bit about personalization.
100%, Francis. Please do chime in, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Guy Yalif. I'm co-founder and CEO of Intellimize. For the last several years, I've been putting AI in the hands of marketing and growth teams to personalize web experiences for each unique visitor in the moment so they can drive more revenue, more customer signups, or more leads to sales. For me, that journey started years ago when I coded a rules-based expert system to design airplanes in college. I've also been a marketer and product guy in personalizing digital experiences across industries for the last 15 years, while at Twitter, Yahoo, and Brero. And I've had the privilege of working with Francis and his team at MadKudu on and off for several years. And along the way, as he said, we've talked for hours and become friends. So let's dive in. We're going to begin, as Sesame shared, by talking about how has personalization evolved over time. And it begins by moving from intuition-driven marketing to data-driven marketing. And for many of us, that started with A/B testing. A/B testing is probably really familiar to most of us. When we're doing A/B testing, we set up a 50-50 traffic split, look at daily reporting, call a winner, and make data-driven decisions. It puts the execution work on us as marketers, and the end result is a winner to show everyone. In some sense, it's kind of like saying every man in the US, I'll pick on men because I happen to know shoe sizes for men more. Every man in the US has to wear size 10.5 shoes because that's the average shoe size in the US for men. It's actually worse than that even because you're also using the winner of an A/B test permanently. So now you're saying every guy in the US has to wear a size 10.5 shoe from the day you're born to the day you die. Sounds totally silly with shoes, but we do it with our websites and in our marketing all the time. That having been said, A/B testing is ideal when you can have one and only one winner. For example, if you had 2 sign-up flows, one built in one tech stack, another one built on another tech stack, you're only going to pick one. A/B testing is ideal there. Now, why do we do it in the first place? We do A/B testing to make more money. And when we think about making more money and moving prospects through a funnel, some of us ask ourselves, is my audience really all the same? Is the best thing to show one prospect the same thing as the best to show another? And then we often turn to rules, the middle box here. Some of your teams may already have started using rules-based personalization. When we're able to identify someone in a segment in advance, it's an important caveat, we can start creating rules for our systems to follow. If someone fits this criteria, like let's say they're less than 2 years old, show them this experience, like a baby shoe, continuing that previous example. Rules-based approaches are great because we get to show different experiences to different segments. We're not treating everyone the same. A rules-based approach can be particularly useful when one audience absolutely cannot see something that's meant for another audience. For example, wouldn't be okay for someone in Texas to see a promotion that's really only available in California. Make sense? As a marketer, we're likely to want more lift. So we create more rules because they work. These rules often take the same form of zooming in on a particular audience or context and then showing them a specific experience, like a particular message or offer or image. And we want more lift, and so we add more rules. And we quickly realize we really want a zillion rules. Like if you wanted a rule for every city in the United States, you'd create and maintain 35,000 of them. But in practice, we marketers tend to top out at a few tens of rules. We often think, okay, well, those were useful, but wouldn't I be able to make more money if I personalize down to the individual? But I can't do that manually. And that thought is where AI and ML-based approaches come in. Machine learning is all about machines learning from data and doing a better job predicting the future as a result. And with real machine learning, it can feel like you're auto-generating a rule for each unique individual visitor. It can feel like you're auto-discovering audience segments and feel like you're auto-updating individual rules all the time. And so to continue our shoe example, it's like getting the right shoe for you. It changes over time based on your tastes and as you grow up based on your individual foot. Sounds totally normal for shoes, we expect it, but we miss it all the time when it comes to websites and marketing. And so if you apply AI the right way, it can help you accelerate your personalization and make more money. Francis, laid this out. I know you and I have talked about this a bunch. What does this trigger for you?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because I think it's a question that a lot of marketers run into of what should they use based on the tools that are available. And I think there are two things that come to mind. The first one is always kind of going back to the fundamentals of why you want to do personalization, kind of what is the sole purpose. And I think you did a good job there of reminding people that when we think about A/B testing, the goal of A/B testing is to like test a hypothesis. I mean, it really comes from the like statistics world of like, do we reject a hypothesis that one version is better than another? So it's the perfect tool for the context of testing something. And so I think it's always going back to what you're trying to accomplish, and then figuring out like how you actually do that is the second step, and looking at the toolbox that's available. And I love the example of the shoe size, and I think it was a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago. Segment was running this awesome billboard campaign in the Bay Area, where when you would drive up on the highway in the Bay Area, they had this billboard that said "Good morning, LA."
I remember that one.
Below had like data is important or something like that, which I thought was like really, really smart, because yes, like maybe they sell to more customers in LA. And if they were only to do A/B tests, they realize, oh, if we advertise to LA, if we talk about LA, we get more revenue because we have more people buying from LA. So let's just talk about LA all the time. And that just doesn't make sense. And I thought it was a very kind of on the nose and funny at the same time way of showing how it's important to not just take the overall winner of a campaign, but really take the most likely winner given the context of a particular user. And the last thing that I'll talk maybe a tiny bit about is one of the things. So MadKudu is also a machine learning at the core company for marketers, and I think one of the things that I keep on running into is that the word machine learning and AI. I mean, like a couple of years ago, it was scary. I think now people have like a bit of a BSO meter that comes up, and it's always interesting because they're wondering like, oh, like why does it have to be ML or AI? And one of the ways I think about it is ultimately like the words machine learning is basically like a machine like learning to do something, but I also see it as a one step evolution from automation, right? If you think of how we approach things, like we start doing things like very manually, and then we get to a point where, from a scale perspective, it's hard to do it manually. Then you start putting automation, and now you start looking at, instead of just going super wide in the automation, you want to go deep. You want to have more use cases and accommodate for like all the cities in the world. And now you want to know, well, based on the weather in that city, I might want to have a different message. And now you have all these new variants to handle. That gets to a point where manually handling is impossible. And that's where this kind of next level of automation, which you can call kind of machine learning, really comes into place. Like the ability to handle at a broader scale a lot of that automation to pick and find the right version to display to people. So I think it's something that I encourage people to think about. Of if your context is very, very narrow and you're really wanting to test just one thing, then like A/B testing is fine. And if you're going into the realm of wanting to personalize, that's where like what ML is going to help you do is actually be able to do a lot more testing without massive headaches linked to like all the different like combinatory possibilities that would come out of your different variants. So yeah, I think that that's one thing that hopefully people, take away from this today, is that ML like might seem scary, but at the end of the day, it's actually not that complicated. It's not much more complicated than running an A/B test. It's close to the same. But it's really about learning more than actually just testing like a binary outcome that you've already, that you have a hint towards.
Francis, that resonates a ton. And thank you for the segment example. We have seen, in fact, there are incarnations of ML where they ask us marketers to choose between a bunch of different algorithms. Most of us did not go to school learning the difference between, linear regression and a neural network and a boosted decision tree when we were learning how to be great marketers. What we are typically great at doing, again, I'm stereotyping, so by definition does not apply to everybody, but most marketers are really great at empathizing with their prospects, at creating that human connection of thinking through what's a day in their life like. And then at getting really creative at coming up with ideas to move those prospects through a funnel, to get them to turn into a customer. That's our superpower. Machine learning then can be a real amplifier to that, where we can focus on that and not have to get into the bowels of the ML, depending on how it's implemented, and let it do what it's great at doing. It's great at operating at massive scale. Our average customer over the last couple of years tried 177 different personalization ideas. Had they done that with A/B testing, would have taken them a quarter century, 25 years. We used ML exactly as you described, Francis, to try not the 177 ideas, but the 78 million possible combinations of those ideas. None of us as mere mortal marketers would ever go do that, but there was money sitting in doing so. We drove more leads for our B2B customers because of that. Two, it's great at listening and acting 24/7, right? We get tired. We're not always looking. We had a customer that drove a big promo, tripled their traffic overnight. Turns out the 200% did not behave the same way the 100% did. 4 hours later, which was 2 a.m, the machine learning realized this and changed what it was showing. It changed the mix. Over the course of the next 2 days, as the effect of the promo decayed, changed it back automatically without a human intervening. Had we been running A/B tests, we wouldn't have even gotten an answer by the time the promo was done. And so, the ability to act at scale, listen 24/7, and then to your point about personalization, act with superhuman levels of precision to personalize down to the individual visitor, it takes our work as marketers and simply gets us more bang for the buck out of the same thing. Now, that's one approach when we're thinking about personalizing for everybody. A topic you and I have talked a lot about, and many marketers have talked about in B2B marketing, is ABM. How do you think about that in this context, Francis?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because to me, ABM is the epitome of the personalized for segments. I see a lot of companies out there, and a lot of our customers are jumping on the ABM bandwagon, and I think it makes sense. There's a lot of value in the initiative, and it goes back to it's essentially trying to figure out how to do enterprise sales and marketing at scale with technology, rather than like highly paid field marketing and field sales. But on the kind of the demand gen side, one of the things that we see very popular is personalization of landing pages and things like that for ABM, which is very much into the personalization for segment. You're saying, I've identified a group of companies, and whenever someone from that group hits my website, I want to show them a different landing page, or I want to have like case studies that are specific to their industry or whatnot. And that one, I think, also, is like fits into the scope here, where that's great. And I think ultimately what you're trying to do is you're saying, like, I know these people are higher value. I want to take, better care of them. So I'm going to try and build an experience that's better for them. What I think is really compelling about it is and this is where like the personalization to the individual is critical. What you're doing is with this ABM initiative is really the right job of a marketer. You're thinking about what is the ideal customer journey that I want to orchestrate for people that I care about, and then you start focusing on those people and you start designing, a customer journey that you think is better for the customer, and from that you kind of design something a little bit different. I think where the ML part really comes into play and becomes really interesting is now you can say, well, instead of only focusing on these and having one hypothesis that I'm going to have one branch of the experiment for my ABM customers, my target account list, and a different one for everyone else, you can start adapting. And maybe, like having the case study in one place or another has a different impact. Maybe you should talk about the case studies, and based on how engaged the account is, maybe they're not ready to talk case studies, they want to learn more and they need education. Like you have even more variance. But I think ultimately what I love about the ABM initiative is that it's educating more marketers on the personalization side away from just A/B tests and into the idea of what is the perfect customer journey I want to orchestrate. And I think the next step, what we're seeing today, is that ABM tools are limited in their capabilities when it comes to the personalization, but at least it's pushing people to think about what is this ideal journey that I want to orchestrate and I want to do better. And now I think people are going to keep on looking for tools to do a better and better job at personalizing the journey. And that's where I think it's important as marketers to start looking around a bit beyond just the ABM platforms that do a really good job at hosting like individual landing pages and like specifically tailored for your target account list pages, but think more about like if you take this and this concept and you apply it to your other accounts that are still valuable, might not be target accounts, but still going to generate value, what would you want to do differently? And that kind of feeds into a bit of a roadmap for personalization, where you can start thinking of like bringing in more AI tools to run experiments and to actually learn to see what works well for different customers.
Francis, that resonates a lot in terms of thinking about what you do with all of your traffic, not just the named traffic. You triggered a couple of things for me. We're used to seeing, just as you were describing, sort of testing, personalization, and ABM being 3 budgets, 3 teams, 3 strategies, 3 different ways of looking at the world. Humbly submitted, they're all in service of making more money. They're all in service of more leads to sales, more customers, more revenue, depending on what's important in your business. We'd humbly submit that you should think about them together as a spectrum. It's very much in line with what you were saying. If you say, hey, look, this is a named account, let's pick a simple example. I want to use the company name in the headline, right? Let's pretend it's JetBlue. I'll make a pick on JetBlue because I was an airplane guy before. Okay, I show up from JetBlue's office, you use reverse IP lookup, I'm coming from their office. You want to welcome me in the headline on the homepage and treat it like a landing page. Awesome. We're used to saying that's ABM. If they're from JetBlue, show them their headline, show them their name in the headline. You could do better. You could say, yes, I want to use that rule, but within that rule, I want to use machine learning. I want to have 5 different headlines, all of which say JetBlue in different ways. Hi, JetBlue. Welcome back, JetBlue. Whatever it might be. You can pair those together for those elements. You could use that for, naming the account rep. You could use it for putting their competitor logos in your logo farm. Wouldn't it be great if there were 8 logos in the logo farm, 3 of them were United, Delta, and Southwest? I'm making them up, but and then you could use ML to say, all right, well, I've done the rule of if they show up from JetBlue, I want their competitors to show up. But you could use ML to pick which version. Do I want 3 competitors out of 8, 4, 5? Do I want to do it all the time? Which competitors do I show? There's more money to be made, more juice to be squeezed by pairing them together. Thought 1. So on the things you're used to doing rules for, you can optimize across multiple versions. 2, there's a whole bunch of other stuff on the page. Maybe it's the case study by industry. Maybe it's content on the page. Maybe it's how you lay out the page. Those are elements that may not, in fact, be tied directly to the account. You can then use ML to personalize those. And 3rd, you've got the other 98% of your traffic that isn't named that you also want to deliver a better experience towards. And you might, for example, use MadKudu to say, ooh, I want to predict how much revenue this company is going to go generate. You've got your named accounts, you're sending them to their named rep. You've got the high value accounts, You want to send them to sales. You've got the low value accounts. You want to go, just as you were describing, shape their journey to send them to self-serve. You don't want to bug sales with them. And you can use these as a spectrum from the named account to the high value to everyone else to deliver better experiences and make more money, full stop. Additionally, you can use their experiences on the site, what they've done, their behaviors, to infer a lot about them. If you know nothing about them, and I went to the Southwest Airlines case study, you might infer I'm an enterprise company, you might infer I'm in the airline industry. If I've been back 4 or 5 times to the site, you might infer I've actually got a lot of interest. And you might choose to show me a different chatbot, right? My first visit, you might show me a generic chatbot. My 5th visit, you might show me a more aggressive chatbot that's going to push me to talk to sales because I've shown up a bunch of times. And so very much in line with what you were saying, we see this spectrum from, the named account all the way to anonymous traffic, and the signals we can use to do a better job using rules, using machine learning to personalize the experience for them. Anything else that triggers for you, Francis, before we move to the next topic?
No, I think it's actually a great intro to the next topic, because one of the things I was going to say is it's important to figure out what problem you're trying to solve, and that's kind of what I was mentioning initially, and making sure that you use the right tool in a toolbox for that. And I think there's a time when ML is going to be super helpful. There's a time when it isn't. And one example that always comes back to mind for me is like a cute type of personalization that the former CMO of MongoDB was sharing at SaaStr, whatever, like 4 years ago. And it was basically if someone, and this was from her days back at DocuSign, if someone would hit the careers page of DocuSign, then they would kind of flag them as like a low score, but that's like a fairly traditional thing to do. What was really cute about this was that if they identified someone as a competitor hitting their website, they would actually always push them to the careers page and essentially try to poach people from their competitors. And what's interesting about this one is that this is where we fall into your like rules that take precedence over any kind of machine learning, right? Like you don't want the machine to understand, oh, this is a competitor, therefore the best thing to do is to push them to that, because this is where you actually have a specific goal of saying, for my competitors, I want to push them to the career page. I don't care about them converting and like downloading an ebook or anything like that. I want to push them there. So this is where we go back to the question of like making sure you clearly identify what are the goals that you're trying to optimize for. And from there, design the experiments and design the journey. In most cases, what we're trying to do is, we're trying to get more sales qualified opportunities. To get that, we need, people to convert that are high value. For that, we need people to spend time either on our website or some web property that educates them towards the problem that we solve, and then get them to convert. And so this is really where ML shines, at least in that context of understanding what is going to be the next best action for someone to keep on engaging with the website, and therefore increase their likelihood to then convert. But again, I do want to emphasize on the fact that that is like one specific use case. It is generally the most common use case for marketers, but there are other use cases that you might want to treat differently, where rule-based segmentation is going to be, and personalization is going to be critical, like having competitors and routing them to different pages, or even having customers and routing them to different pages. Like the experience for a customer should be very different than the experience for a potential buyer. And that kind of leads us to a bit of the framework that I think is valuable for you all to take out of this conversation with you. Is we kind of see that there's like 3 types of personalizations that typically happen. There's kind of the low hanging fruit. I think the thing that everyone does is kind of structural personalization, where you're going to change like text on a CTA, you're going to change like where the nav bar is, you're going to just like change the look and feel of a page. It's like very easy to orchestrate an A/B test. You change like a couple colors here and there, and then you pick a winner. Not to say this is not relevant. It is very relevant in some cases, but this is probably the easiest thing to implement, and it tends to get a lot of the attention. But yeah, it does one thing, and it's like that structural change. There's a second kind of box of personalization, which is really changing the messaging. And this is really where you start trying to iterate on how to, share your message with customers. So based on which website they're coming from or which UTM, you're going to say, well, I'm going to talk about different things because I know that based on their UTMs, they might be more interested in this value prop or that value prop, or even trying to figure out like what is the right way to frame the value prop that will actually get people to engage more and want to read further. And then this is a challenge that marketers are constantly struggling with, right? Because on the one hand, you want to create stickiness with your headline. You want people to read that headline and be like, "Ooh, I want to learn more. Like this is interesting. Tell me more." But at the same time, you don't want it to be too high level that someone who's actually really interested in buying your tool is going to look at this and be like, this like I don't know, this doesn't seem like detailed enough. I'm not that excited about it. And for us, at least at MadKudu, this is something that's really interesting because we sell to marketers, and marketers have a BSO meter that actually is really good. So if you have messaging that's too high level, like marketers and in particular marketing ops people are gonna be like, okay, great, like this is just another, like you're gonna solve the world and make it a better place with like automation, blah, blah, blah. I'm not interested. But at the same time, for someone who's like starting kind of the digitalization of their marketing practice, for them, you want to like open their eyes to the fact that there's more than just field marketing and that they have to think about their marketing mix in a different way. So anyway, that personalization is something that is really tricky, and you can't, again, just run tests across everyone because the DNA of the people visiting your website is going to be different. But it is something that a lot of people play around with. And the final one is really the journey personalization, where now you start saying, well, based on all the different interactions and based on how I think I've identified you, I'm actually going to create very different journeys for different types of customers and starting to personalize that. So that's like recognizing that you have a customer that came back to your website, so you push them down a different journey than a target account or than a just regular net new account. And ultimately, I think the part that is critical here is to understand that you want to do a bit of all of these. Like you can't just be doing um, like CTA optimization without thinking about how that impacts the customer journey for different people. And my recommendation would be like always, always, always start with the customer journey. I mean, just that, I know it sounds stupid and it's basic and like every marketer like thinks about this, but at the end of the day, the role of marketing is to help customers find a solution that meets their needs. And that means understanding that every customer is a little bit different, has slightly different needs, and has a different status when it relates to understanding the need and understanding the solution to those needs. And start with that, and then you can do like basic testing, but within each journey is isolated. And at some point, when you start having like more than 1,000 people visiting your website, then it starts making sense to actually do machine learning and start optimizing to a much finer granularity the different experiences. Guy, how does that jive with what you're seeing?
Jives really, really well. We too have seen that the best results come when our fellow marketers are investing in a portfolio of ideas, from simple to complex, from structural to messaging to optimizing the whole journey. When we reflected on why that was the pattern, at least our thought was that it's because while we as experienced marketers can come up with ideas that are in the ballpark, that are likely to be right, the reality is no one knows. There aren't rules. I know we were just talking about rules-based stuff, but like, it's not like every button should be green or every headline should be about, value. If there were, you don't need most of the growth profession. You don't need a whole bunch of these approaches. It's a probabilistic game. And given that it's a probabilistic game, you want to be able to, try a bunch of ideas of varying complexity, of varying approaches at once, and quickly learn and see which ones are more effective and less effective, and learn from those. Do multiple generations of ideas. That approach is the only thing we've seen reliably lead to more conversions, more sales qualified leads. And so, yes, what you're saying resonates a bunch. It also resonates to the point earlier, do the thing we as humans are uniquely great at doing. Empathize with your prospects, intimately understand a day in their life, understand what's on their mind, because that can then shape your understanding of their mindset can shape what ideas you try, right? We've seen some marketers try basically spaghetti on the wall. Hey, I can test, I'm going to throw everything in there. Okay, that will eventually get you to the right answer, to an answer that will drive more revenue. Better is spending time understanding your prospects and understanding, hey, in this moment in their journey, where are they? What's on their mind? And try ideas around that. And so, we've seen folks take the same page, like their homepage, and have it render very differently for different people. First visit, repeat visit, 10th visit, existing customer, you said it, competitor, job seeker, investor if you're a public company, different audiences and different points in their journey, to take that same real estate and have it meet your prospects where they are in their journey with you. That principle has also reliably led to lift and more revenue in the customers that we work with. I'm going to take a step back mechanically on the webinar. If you've got questions, please click on the questions and submit them. I see Tim, thank you for submitting the first one. And the question is, how can we apply the benefits of AI ML to more effective Google paid ads? Great question. You're already getting some of the benefit because of how Google's running things, right? Let's pretend we're talking about SEM, search. Google tells you, hey, give me 5 paid ads, not 1. I'll figure out what to show whom. I'll figure out what to show each individual visitor. I'll show the better ideas more often. The ones that didn't work as well, the creative, I'll show them less often. They're doing that in the ad. Wouldn't it be great if you can then do that on your website? Do the exact same thing. Show better ideas more often, starve losing ideas of traffic, and figure out what to show whom. AI and ML can help you do that. Thought 1. Thought 2, as specific ideas, continuing the message someone just saw in the ad onto the website, that tends to be a high probability of play, right? If you were talking about innovation in the ad, talk about innovation on the site when they land. If you're talking about value, talk about value. Third thought, you paid Google effectively through your CPC to target that ad, right? You use some of the information they have to target that ad. Use that on your site. You probably have already instrumented a bunch of URL parameters, typically they're UTM parameters, for your own self-interest, for your own analytics, so you can see which targeting, which ad campaign, which creative worked better. Use that on your website. Look at those UTM parameters. Use that to make your homepage feel like a landing page. And in doing so, get more out of your ads investment and AI and ML. Francis, does this question trigger anything additionally for you?
Yeah, I think that's super relevant on customizing the journey based on the additional information you basically get from having someone show up from Google. I will say there's another element that can be done maybe slightly outside of the scope of personalization, but I think it is relevant when we're thinking about optimizing Google ads. One of the things that you want to do is reinforce learning, which is like a typical kind of machine learning element. So it's interesting, like Google has their own algorithm, and Google was designed for high volume transaction interaction. So it works really well in the B2C world where you send people to a website, they purchase, and then you send that purchase back to Google. Google knows, great, we did a good job, we showed this ad, person purchased, awesome, let's move on. In B2B, it's a little bit more tricky because you have a buying cycle that is long, and it's not like you can fire a transaction back to Google, because people don't typically come to your website and buy for $30,000 and then in a couple of minutes. So what B2B marketers tend to do is, once you get a form conversion or any kind of like form fill, you send that back as a positive outcome to Google, which is a double-edged sword. I think it's great on the one hand. I mean, you are kind of positively reinforcing Google and saying, okay, like send me people that are like more aware of the problem and likely to click. On the flip side, it's kind of reinforcing the behavior of, like click farms or whatever you want to call it, like people who just like come in and like pop and, fill in stuff. It doesn't tell you that this is actually a valuable customer. So one of the things that, at least like we do on the MadKudu side, is when someone fills in a form, we evaluate the quality of that lead. Like, are they likely to be a good fit for your product or not? And then we send that back to Google as a specific conversion so that we can train Google to say, hey, Google, only learn from the conversions on the website that we know were relevant to our business. Everything else is noise, and I don't want you to send more of those. So that's like another way of using machine learning, because you're kind of using the machine learning to evaluate the quality of a prospect, sending that back as a positive outcome to Google to train Google's own machine learning to determine what makes a good prospect for you, because you've created that feedback loop. And in addition to that, you want to make sure that on your website, you're kind of personalizing everything to the new information that you acquired.
Francis,
Good.
that resonates a lot. And in fact, we've seen some folks use us to send signals back. In that particular example, it was Facebook, but same principles, what you're describing with Google, with a value. So they could know this was worth more or worth less. We purposely built into our system something we haven't seen anywhere else, which is very much in line with what you're describing, where you would say, hey, I actually, as the marketer, I want my prospects to do a bunch of things, because this is a long journey, as you said. And those things have different value to me. I'm going to make up a hypothetical, right? You can say email submission's worth $20 to me. Somebody attending a webinar is worth $500 to me. Somebody asking for a demo is worth $1,000 to me. Somebody downloading my Gartner report's worth $50 to me. And right, as some made up value, and have a system use ML to optimize for total value across all of those, so that if somebody gives you an email, that impacts what future people see. Somebody asks for a demo, that impacts what future people see more, because I care more about that. We found that sort of reinforcement quite valuable. And the more we talk to marketers, the more we came to understand that's in line with how they think about it. That's in line with how we run our businesses. With Looker, for example, we tried a whole bunch of ideas with them. They were able to drive 30% more leads off their website. Great, they were super happy. That resulted in 15% more downstream stage 2 qualified leads. Awesome. They then did what you said, Francis. They went and set up multiple goals in our system, gave them different values. That 15% downstream stage 2 qualified lead became 44% downstream stage 2 qualified lead. Really meaningful impact for their business. At the same time, from their website, they went from having 30% more to having 16% less coming off the website. Sales was over the moon. They got more of what they wanted, less of what they didn't, because they took this reinforcement approach that you're describing. Being thoughtful about time, we had some specific examples, Francis and I, to share with the audience that we're going to go through now. I'm going to turn to the first one. If you have questions as we're going through this, please click on Q&A and share them with us. Some ideas on how to personalize, some thought starters, in line with what Francis was saying earlier about, simple, medium, complex ideas, different ways to personalize. This is a great example of how having a portfolio of ideas, including some simpler ones, is important and can make a big impact. You can see here one of Sumo Logic's landing pages. This is a paid search landing page to the question asked earlier. The Sumo Logic team runs testing on these pages. They happen to use our tool, Intellimize, for it, and routinely tests the imagery, size of fonts, colors on CTA buttons, and just about everything else on the page, tending to focus above the fold. They've got pretty strict brand guidelines, and so the CTA buttons are consistently Sumo Logic blue across their pages. In this case, they ended up testing other colors with the brand team's blessing, and they're glad they did. The green button variation you see here increased this page's conversion rate by 33%. To what we covered on the previous slide, list comes from a whole portfolio of ideas. There's value in actively and continuously testing simple changes in addition to more complex ones. Second idea, another customer, Bonusly, experimented with placement of their nav bar. They actually found it more impactful to split up their nav bar, move it to separate the navigation links visually from the calls to action in the top nav. You would think this is going to have a big impact. 41% lift in homepage conversions. by visually separating these. Would we have predicted this was a thing? Maybe. To have that kind of impact, you wouldn't know in advance, or at least I wouldn't have predicted that. We have other customers testing navbar content, including showing or hiding elements based on the predicted value of the customer. In fact, the most extreme one we saw was somebody, actually they were a joint customer with MadKudu, who used predicted value to say, oh, your enterprise, I'm literally going to hide the pricing from the navigation because I want you to call sales. That was risky for them to do internally. They tried it. It turned out to be really good in that particular situation. Other ideas, we've seen customers take long list of text links that are in a nav bar. This was in e-commerce, not B2B, with product categories. They turn them into a set of images, visuals of the product right in the nav bar, which drove more engagement. You could imagine a large enterprise B2B company with multiple product lines, multiple customer segments doing the same thing. And while implementing a nav bar change across the entire site might be somewhat more involved than a button color change, again, there's value in testing a portfolio of ideas, and your nav bar is often surprisingly impactful. I see there's a question. I'm going to turn, Francis, to you to talk about the next example, and then we'll cover the question. Sound good?
Sounds great. And I think I'll, like, in part kind of go over the question while we're doing that. But
Awesome.
yeah, this is another example of a customer that was doing great on the personalization side. So Segment had a bunch of different things that they were doing, but for context, and this goes back to what I was mentioning about knowing like what the customer journeys are and what that entails. So for those who don't know, Segment is like a CDP. So they target developers, and they have from a go-to-market motion perspective, they have multiple funnels, right? So they have kind of an enterprise tier and therefore an enterprise funnel with like a dedicated team for that. And then they have kind of a velocity go-to-market motion that is driven with a lot of self-serve adoption because they have a freemium model. So essentially, these two funnels are meant to operate in a very different way, right? On the enterprise tier, the goal is to have people request a demo, talk to sales, close like, six-figure deals. On the self-serve side, it's about getting people to sign up for the product, activate the product, start using it, become advocates so that when they move to the next, to their next company, or when they're ready to actually make a purchase, Segment becomes the tool of choice. And so this is, this makes it really tricky when we're thinking about the world of just doing like an A/B test or something like that. Which should be your main CTA? Should it be talk to sales or get started? Well, the problem is that depending on who's visiting your website, it's probably going to be very different, right? You don't want to only have a talk to sales CTA, because then you're going to be submerging your reps with a bunch of like small companies that just want to get started. And on the flip side, you don't want everyone to go through to get started, because you don't want your Fortune 100 company to be faced with a developer console and have to go through security to even authorize anything to start. So what ended up happening is that we ran like multiple tests, but one of them that was really interesting, and that's where I think it answers the question that we had, which was, how do I get started without necessarily the like full ML AI capabilities and in a more manual way? Well, I think the first step is understanding like what are some of the biggest groups of prospects visiting your website that could be clustered into separate entities that will have different journeys. And so this is where the example of Segment is relevant, where we're saying, well, we know we have two groups: people that want to use the product as a self-serve initiative, and people who are on the enterprise side and might have like bigger questions. And therefore, for each of those, we are going to change what the main call to action is going to be, so that the enterprise main call to action was get a demo, and the main call to action for self-serve was sign up. And what we saw is that in both cases, there was a clear lift for the main CTA that was picked off of intuition based on that separation that we had. So that's like an easy, fairly easy way to do it. Still requires like some IP lookup capabilities, or at least like tracking. But maybe if we move to the next slide, this is another thing that we run with Segment that can help, is when people request a demo, again, like we're kind of running real-time scoring, but for you, if you don't want to invest in technologies, like you don't necessarily need to do that real-time API scoring. You could just like have like a couple, like maybe one data point that you ask for in your form. And based on the value of that, you can decide on the thank you page to actually fast track people so that if they're requesting a demo, you actually give them access to a rep's calendar. And if they're not qualified, you do your regular follow-up and potentially even push them to like a group demo or something like that. So I think you don't need necessarily to start with like super complex and many variations, even though I think there is a ton of value in doing it. And today tools like Intellimize make it a lot more accessible and a lot easier to do than in the past. But I think the part that is the most critical is that as marketers, we don't hide our strategy behind technology. It's really critical to identify what are the customer journeys that you want to orchestrate, or at least what are the groups for which you want to orchestrate different journeys. And then you start applying ML, testing, like anything to actually customize that journey and make it as frictionless as possible for them. And that will yield massive dividends.
Great insight, Francis. Resonates a ton. And, to the question that was asked, I reinforce what you said. And, personalization for beginners is all about understanding that prospect journey. It is all about then thinking, what experience do I want to give them? To Francis's example of, hey, they're large fries or small fries, they're high value or low value, or asking them for a bit of info to go personalize the experience. It resonates a ton. And I think the principle that I would offer is, you said, hey, we have some knowledge about our prospects. Even while we're in a manual world, use whatever knowledge you have and meet your prospect where they are in their journey with you. Have that as a mental model. That'll drive revenue. Whether you're doing it with an A/B test, rules-based personalization, or ML, we happen to think ML is a great way for you to take the knowledge you have and maximize the bang for the buck. Right? Like our customers over the last 2 years got 46% lift on average in the metrics they cared about. Their hit rate on ideas wasn't any better than it was before. We asked them, we looked, right? Their hit rate was the same as it was before. But when you take the good ideas and show them more often and starve the bad ideas of traffic, just like Google's doing in paid ads, you make more money. And so we would suggest take those principles, take whatever data you have and meet your prospect where they are in their journey with you. If you can predict value, awesome. You can change a lot of the experience. If you can monitor their behavior, even just on your site, you can infer a whole bunch. Next idea. We'll keep going. We have a customer drift who, among other things, is experimenting with welcoming back returning visitors, recognizing they're in a different stage in their journey. How many of us on this webinar are guilty of not acknowledging that a prospect's been here before? Or even worse, treating a customer like a prospect? I've been guilty of that most of the decade I've been a marketer, most of the 15 years I've been in the ads. Simply remembering those details and creating a different experience for these visitors can have an outsized impact for your prospect's behavior. Case in point, this variation that Drift ran helped them boost conversions by 13%. You can take this visit memory further and, like we were talking about earlier, in a B2B context, treat somebody who's visited your site 4 to 5 times as clearly interested. Put more aggressive talk to sales messaging in front of them. Show them a different, if you're using Drift chatbot in front of them that'll push them more aggressively to sales. Show them, mid-funnel or late funnel messaging, more about your product comparing to competitors rather than early funnel explaining the concept and talking about the overall value prop. And as a last idea for you to consider, and then we'll switch to Q&A, being mindful of time, we all work really hard to get prospects to our website, to engage them. We want to avoid losing them. Here's a personalization which helps turn more departing visitors into conversions. When a visitor shows exit intent, perhaps they drag their cursor off the page on desktop, or on mobile, they stayed idle for a long time and didn't do anything. You can pop up a window with a special offer. That offer might be content, discount, special access. It's not always about money. It's engaging them and sharing some value with them. you can salvage more conversions, drive more form fills, drive more purchases than you would have otherwise. And you can take that special value you wanted to give them and avoid giving it to everybody, right? You're giving it to folks who behaved in a way that you said, yep, I want to go do this. Save the special offers for those moments where you really need it. Single Care, a drug prescription company in this case, implemented this and has seen great results. I'm going to flip to the next slide so we can open it up to Q&A. But as we do, Francis, I wonder, did either of those trigger something additional for you to share?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it goes back to the, I think what you were mentioning of, you know, the, how do you get started? I think the example of Drift is really interesting because it's, and that's one of the things that I like about the team at Drift is that they're very pragmatic. That's one thing, again, like I mentioned, like don't hide your lack of strategy behind technology, but also don't let like complexity steer you away from pragmatism. Like there's a lot of things that aren't that complicated and that work, as long as it, you know, increases the relevance of your interactions with the customer. And I think, you know, just like something as simple as welcoming people back. I mean, to some extent, it says something about the state of B2B that makes a difference. It means that every other website is so impersonal that even just recognizing the fact that you're coming back to the website is yielding a massive lift. So I'd say like the important thing learning here is that this is like blue ocean, right? Like people aren't in B2B aren't doing a lot of personalization. So it's easy to get started. It's easy to make a difference and start by being pragmatic and always focusing on the customer. And again, like something that I think the Drift team is really like obsessed with their customer journey. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been growing so fast and that they have these experiments that work well because they're constantly trying to figure out, you know, how do we be more personal in our interaction with our customers and think less in like A/B tests, which kind of leads you to think about prospects as just like anonymous statistics, but rather think of like every individual visiting your website as a potential buyer that is on a journey, and how do you then like appeal to that person? I think that's one of the things that we have to some extent a little bit lost, I think, in B2B marketing because of all the technology that's been out there. But at the end of the day, we are people selling to people, and leveraging technology to bring back that connection and make sure that you're able to talk to your individual prospects as human beings is something that should be front and center in your strategy.
Well, it resonates a lot. Thank you for the insight. And I see another question came in. With the last example on pop-ups, this one, how do visitors feel about that? Do they tend to find that's annoying or intrusive? Does that affect conversions? Longer ago than I care to admit, 17 years ago, I met one of my co-founders running most of Yahoo GeoCities. That site didn't invent pop-ups, but sure used an awful lot of them. Those back then were state of the art, and then we all decided they were super annoying. We tended to not find that reaction, unlike the display ad pop-ups of the past. Why? Because this tends to be triggered by an action, by somebody saying, hey, I'm out, and it tends to add genuine value, right? You're giving them something in return for their continued attention, in return for their email. And so we have not had our customers tell us, man, our prospects are pissed. They're frustrated. Like they felt spammed. Instead, because this was behaviorally triggered, because it was relevant, and because it was trying to give the prospect something, we have tended to see less of that kind of reaction. Francis, anything this triggers for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a subtle mix, and I think there is no one size fits all, and the reaction is very much going to depend on who you're selling to. Like there are things that we talked about that work well on like the Drift example, right? I'm saying like, hey, welcoming back people. Like if you're selling to marketers are going to love it. It's like a tagline, it's big, it's like in your face, like, oh, personalization, great, I like that. If you're, talking to developers in the security and like privacy industry, and you're starting to show them that you're actually tracking their behavior, now you might actually get the complete opposite reaction. And so I think it goes back to like understanding the ethos and like the state of mind of your customers to make sure that the personalization is relevant. And it isn't just like copy pasting a bunch of recipes from other successful stories into yours. It's really understanding like what is going to be relevant to your customers. And in some cases, like pop-ups are super relevant. I mean, you're looking to buy something and we're telling you, hey, there's a discount. Like, oh, great. I mean, I'll take a discount. But if you're visiting like, you know, a news website and you're trying to read about a specific topic and there's a bunch of pop-ups about something completely unrelated, that doesn't like help you further the narrative of what you're trying to accomplish as a user. And that's when it becomes a problem. So I think that's where, again, like my, you know, don't hide your lack of strategy behind technology comes back into play. Like the idea of the pop-up should only exist if it actually serves the customer. And otherwise the conversions will probably, I mean, the conversion rate will probably not increase if you're just like trying to push people down the funnel without making it easier for them. We see like the results that we've been sharing generally show higher conversion rates when the experiment actually helps reduce friction in the customer journey.
Amen, Francis, on tying all of this to that understanding of your prospect and the journey you want to take them on, and not using technology as sort of a shield for not having that understanding. It's hard to skip. Sometimes it can be hard to do that heavy lifting of like really understanding your prospects, but it informs all the rest of the strategies. I see one question came up. We'll follow up afterwards because we have 2 minutes left. We want to make sure people have time to transition to their next sessions. Alvin, we'll follow up with you directly. Francis, it was a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Same here. And I hope it was helpful. Please don't be shy. Reach out to us with follow-up questions. I mean, we're always happy to help and even to dive into like a session of figuring out what could be done on your website, how to think about the customer journey. Ultimately, we're here to help. And if we can make your journey more relevant with us, then let's do it.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Francis. Completely with you. And it's always nice to compare notes with fellow marketers. Thank you for spending an hour with us. Again, as Francis said, we hope you found value in it. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.